Now what we can do as well is if we select an object in eShare, you can basically see on the right side here which attributes belong to this object. Now what you can do as well is that you can right click on the object and you have a whole bunch of options here. Now the first one, examine, is that if you select this you see a bar appear here on the top and you come into what we call the orbit mode. And you have here a little world with something orbiting around it. And you see that it's enabled. Now this function allows you to orbit around the object that you have selected. Now what you see is that once I'm orbiting this object, is that I can see my selected objects through all the other objects, because as we call it, the X-ray mode is enabled. The X-ray mode is right here, and if I click on it, right now I disable it so I don't see it through other objects, and if I enable it, now I can see it through other objects. Now of course I can also disable the orbiting mode by clicking here on this button, and then I am free to move around. But you see is that the X-ray mode is still turned on. If I completely want to get out of this function, then I just simply click here on this X, and then I am free to move around again. And if I want to bring my view back now again, back to horizontal, again I press H on my keyboard. So going back to the right-click menu, you can also hide an object. Now if I hide it, I cannot right-click and unhide it, right? So what I have to do is that here on the right side of the screen I have a tree, and what you see in the tree is that behind each, as we call it, system, there's an eye, which basically allows you to enable or disable a complete system. Now what you see here next to the orange model, which is the entire model, you see an eye which is shown halfway. Now this means is that something in this entire tree is disabled. So if I click on this eye right here, I enable it or I disable the entire model. I'll explain the whole tree in a little bit, but I would like to continue with the right-click menu first. Now, what I can also do is I can also say here, hide other objects, like this, right? As you see, everything else gets hidden. And then if I want to enable it, I go back to the tree and click here, and then everything comes back. What I can do as well is I can, for example, make an object transparent. Now what you see is that it's well, fairly transparent. At the level of transparency you can set it in settings, but about this I'll talk later. And then if you right click on it again, you can undo the transparency. For the rest, the other functions I will also explain in another video. For now, I'll focus on the tree. So if in the tree I, for example, in this case, because this is an equipment, if I click here on the eye, I disable all the equipments. And if I click on the eye again, I enable all the equipments. And of course, if I open up the equipments tree, I can see the objects in there. This is the same for all the different systems in here. And like this, I can either choose to enable or disable entire systems or objects. What you can also do is you can right click on a system, and then you have sort of the same options when you right click here in the 3D model. That speaks for itself. And if you know, for example, if you're looking for a specific part in the 3D model, so for example a piece of equipment or a valve or another part in the 3D model, you can search it up top here. If you fill in, I know for example is that the number or the name of one valve is 127. So if I fill it in, and it goes directly to the valve in the 3D model. And I automatically enter into the orbit mode, as you see. And then I can exit right here. Bring it back to horizontal. What I also have are the scenes that are built in by default. So which means is that if I click here on Start, I go to my Start scene where my my eShare model starts in the beginning. Now, if there's like a specific location in the 3D model, which, for example, at a later point in time you want to show your manager or your colleague or the customer, what you can do is that you can go to that specific location. So if I, for example, go here, right here, and if I type here tank and then hit enter, what you see is that the tank then comes into this list. So if I would go to a different place in the 3D model, like this, and if I go to tank, it brings me to that specific place. So like this, you are free to create scenes of different places in the 3D model. For the rest, you also have a whole bunch of buttons here on the bottom. I think the most important one is the measure function. If you click on it, you can right click as a start point. You move your mouse button to, for example, a second point. You see that it automatically snaps onto all different kinds of places in the 3D model. So if I right click here again, what you see is that it measures the distance between these 2 points. Now if I hold my mouse to the bottom one, you see is that it also shows me the value of the bottom one or the one here on top. If you play with this function a little bit, you can see is that it will also measure angles, but feel free to play around with it and see what happens. This basically concludes the basic introduction of the walk around here in eShare. So I'd say give it a try and have fun. Till next time.